We are now on the final stretch of this build series. With the town fully completed, all that's left to work on is the battlefield in front of the walls. We will quickly go through the build, since this episode will mainly be focusing on the actual battle taking place here, which is quite long with multiple events taking place. The size of this battlefield is 2 48x48 grey base plates plus 3 of the smaller coloured base plates, bringing the total size of this diorama to 12 grey base plates plus 3 coloured base plates. We first begin with a path leading towards the town. I wanted to make it look a bit rougher and less maintained compared to the road inside the town. I envisioned this area to be farmlands with crop fields and ranches, but I won't be adding any buildings here since I will need the space to place hundreds of minifigures and siege engines for the coming battle. I created some minor elevation changes so I could do some contouring work to give this land some details. I also added a recently plowed and planted crop field for some contrasting colors. But detailing will have to be kept to a minimum since every build takes up valuable space for the minifigures. I built some fencing to partition up the land a bit between the fields and the ranches. I wanted the fence to be destructible with lots of adjustable connection points, since the orcs will be rampaging through this area destroying these fences. These fences also add some much needed points of interest throughout the otherwise flat and empty land. I basically built a ton of them and lined them up where they're needed. I decided to build a large puddle in the ranch since it looked way too empty, but it does mean that I'll have less space for the battle. There won't be any farm animals in here though, since these fields and ranches have been abandoned after the peasants heard about the incoming orcish warband in the previous episode. I used medium nougat for the top elevation to avoid giving this battlefield the monotoned look. For the botanicals, I went with the sparse bushlands theme and kept it to a minimum. Since botanical pieces do take up a lot of space, I didn't add any trees for the same reason. Orcs sighted northeast, the town guard declared. The streets of Lionsguard, once bustling with life, now lie abandoned. The townsfolk have sheltered in buildings, huddled in fear as the air grows heavy with uncertainty. Meanwhile, the brave soldiers ready themselves for the impending battle as the distant sound of war drums grows louder. Tell the men to keep their eyes peeled for the Easterners. The king may not believe it, but I'm certain they're in league with the orcs. There's no other reason for the orcs to venture this far west when they have the eastern kingdoms to pillage, Marshal Ayler commanded. I am inclined to agree with you, Your Grace, the captain replied. Many of them have slipped into town among the crowds seeking refuge behind the walls. We have not seen any of them since. With their trebuchets, the orcs unleashed a heavy barrage upon the city walls, aiming to shatter the defenders' resolve. The warband kept their distance, careful to avoid the deadly volleys of arrows raining from the walls. Amidst the chaos, the trolls began pushing the siege towers towards the walls. The defenders, caught in disarray, could do little to stop the advance. Before they knew it, the orcs were upon the walls, breaching the line of defense. A fierce battle raged on the walls as the defenders fought desperately to halt the orc advance. Meanwhile, in the tunnels underneath town. "The orcs are on the walls," Baron Fastfinger reported. "Now's our chance. The guards should be distracted enough. Remember, brothers, we regroup here once the job's done, or the orcs will have us for dinner," Deadeye Dixon said. "We haven't seen the Easterner in a while." 9 lives, Alfredo muttered, his tone uncertain. "He'll pay us, I'm sure of it. Let's just get this over with," Deadeye Dixon replied, dismissing the doubt. "Your Majesty, a group of mercenaries known as the Wolfpack Brotherhood have breached the gatehouse and opened it for the orcs," Marshal Ayla reported urgently. "Who are these men?" King Leo asked. "We've had minor clashes with them before, but they've always confined their raids to the fringes of our kingdom. Nothing of this scale," Marshal Ayla replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Gods be damned! Traitors to their own blood!" Prince Leandro shouted. "They shall pay for this treachery. We must bring them to justice at once." "Justice will have to wait, Your Highness. The orcs are pouring through the gate. We must reinforce the men below or we'll lose the town," Marshal Ayla said hastily. The princes of all 4 kingdoms and their men rushed down to reinforce the gate. As they arrived, the orcs had already broken through the line, overwhelming the defenders. Prince Leandro's voice rang out, "Hold the line, men!" Amidst the chaos, the Easterners emerged from the shadows. They moved towards Prince Dracius, cutting through the confusion with deadly precision. Before his guards could react, the prince was struck down from behind, collapsing as his life slipped away. Caught in a pincer movement, the men panicked. Marshal Ayla immediately called for a retreat back up to the high ground. "We can no longer count on the Dragon Kingdom to stand with us," King Leo said. "He was killed by the Easterners. This may strengthen King Drakirian's resolve to stay with us. He chose to join us as a means to counter this threat," Marshal Ayla countered. "Perhaps, but doubtful. I know how he thinks," King Leo replied, his tone dismissive. The defenders fought desperately to hold the bottleneck leading up to the keep. To the men, the situation felt hopeless as wave after wave of orcs pressed forward. "You hear that?" Prince Fothrith asked. "Aye, that's the horn of the great cavalry," Lord Black answered, a spark of hope in his voice. "The cavalry is here! Now's our chance to push forward!" "Your Majesty, the men are ready and await your word," Marshal Rowland said. "We may be too late," King Fotier muttered. "Men of the Falcon, today we face our fate. These foul heathens have burned our lands and slain those we hold dear. Dead or alive, we shall have our vengeance, King Foltier cried, his voice filled with fury. After the Orcish warlord fell, the Orcs lost their leadership and scattered in disarray. The majority was swiftly picked off by the Black Falcon cavalry. Commander, Prince Dracius has been eliminated as per your orders, the assassin reported. And the rest of the men? After Dracius fell, they immediately retreated up to the battlements. We were left facing the Orcs, those berserkers. They're quicker than they look. I barely escaped. The others weren't so lucky. Unfortunate. The Emperor would have preferred the entire city sacked, but at least we've achieved the other primary objective. Perhaps I won't lose my head over this, said the mysterious Easterner, whose name is Nostul, commander of the Emperor's Fist. Your Majesty, the survivor from Lion's Guard has returned, Marshal Margrave said. Speak, King Dracirin ordered, his tone cold and distant. Your Majesty, we were overwhelmed by the Orcs. Then assassins struck from the shadows. I believe they were Easterners, Prince Leandro and the others. They abandoned us, left us for dead, the survivor said, his voice trembling slightly. And yet, here you stand, King Dracirin said, his voice cutting through the silence. You were sworn to protect my son with your life. What have you to say for this failure? They struck Prince Dracius first, Your Majesty, attacked from the rear of our formation. I was the last standing. I dragged our prince to safety, but it was too late. I have failed you, my king. Dracius, that gullible child. He was the one that convinced me to join their alliance. Now, he is dead. I will have the heads of these so-called kings. And you have failed me. Yet, you returned to explain yourself and did not grovel like a coward. I will grant you a dignified end. The king turned his gaze towards Malthor, the greatest of the Dragonborn. In one decisive swing of Malthor's battle mace, the matter was swiftly concluded. Your Majesty, with the latest report, we are now certain that the Dark Army has captured our mages. Lord knows what the Necromancer plans to do with them. Without this alliance, we cannot hope to defeat him, Marshal Margrave said. I have consulted with Archmage Azax. We possess enough mages to extract limited amounts of dragon essence for now. More will be trained in time. The mages are no longer our focus. I will have my revenge. We cannot afford a war on two fronts alone, Your Majesty. Lord Grimrock is certain our plans to bring the kingdom under the mountain into the fold will work. He will see it done. Won't you, Lord Grimrock? Aye, Your Majesty. Lord Grimrock replied, his tone cold and resolute.